Hello everyone, Coach here another time. Today I welcome you to another level, our time-lapse. Before we start, I'll say that it's definitely been a while since I've last posted anything. The rate has not been that good, but life just got in the way. But well, let's get into it. Firstly, I will change a bit the format of these videos. I already inserted me speaking over it as a way to actually improve the experience and comment on what I'm doing. But now I'm actually cutting some of the footage of what I'm doing, as there's just so much footage to show. This work I'm showing today has been done months ago, but I have just not gotten to speaking over it and editing it, which I am doing right now. So by cutting it, I'll make it easier for myself to keep posting this at a decent rate at the same time I'm working on the actual map. And I also hopefully improve your experience so you don't have to go through as much repetition or as much time to watch a single time lapse. And you know that there's gonna be a lot of those coming forward. It's just the nature of making maps. It takes a lot of time, and if I can optimize it both for myself and for you, it should be better. So let's get into it. So for this entire video, I'm basically doing this out of bounds building that is set at the limit of the map. You saw me searching for some Google Map references earlier for it, and I've comprised a few buildings that I've planned. Oh, this building is gonna be here. This building is gonna be there. This building I'm doing right now, I initially didn't want to make this exact building. I had another reference for it. It was a blockier reference, more modern, like more concrete. So I started blocking that out, but then I thought this will not match that greatly with the main house I've done so far. Like, it's based on the reference. This building is kind of exactly to the side of this main building I've already done, but following references one to one can be good sometimes, but they also can't be. And this time was one of these times where I thought, well, this will not match, this will not look good, or at least it won't look as good as other things I could do. The potential for it is not that great. So I had already blocked out a bit of the building, had already the references planned, and had it in my mind, I'm gonna do this. But then I thought, well, if I go through this idea, it will be, well, I'll finish it, but then it won't look as great. So I took the decision to restart the building while it still was in an early stage. And that was very good decision because once you finish things, it's way harder for you to rework them. So better to change your ideas where the project is on the beginning or you're starting things out. So I changed quickly to make this other building, which I'm doing right now, which is fits way better with the other building I've already done. It has like a similar color palette with a lot of wood, beams, interesting roof shapes, not as blocky, and it has a better way to support the level design I've done in the gray box version. That will be detailing further eventually, but firstly, I can say that I wouldn't have taken this decision to change the building to this other reference, change the process I was doing for it, if I hadn't spent some time just looking and investigating, seeing my possibilities. So that was one thing that I used to do more in my past projects. I used to find a reference for it as thing, I liked it, and then I went straight to do that. But there's infinite amount of possibilities you can do for something. So if you have more options, if you spend more time planning, just gathering things, you will have a better way to access what you should do. So I spent some more time in Google Maps, as I said, and this building came up later, and it had all those characteristics that would make the entire map look better. So having options is good, so you can choose them. And oftentimes, with more options, you also have the possibility to mix these different references. You can make something entirely your own out of these multiple things, kind of a Frankenstein, you could say. But that's for sure one of the hardest things to do when making art, is making your own things, like mixing different sources to get a different idea. Because copying one to one is definitely takes some work, but it's quite straightforward. But mixing things and creating something that works together with these different things takes a lot of skill and practice. So that's probably a good skill to have. Moving on from that, I started actually doing the main shape of the building. And here comes a very important skill, composition. Knowing how the proportions of your building should be by just looking at it makes a lot of difference. And this is something, well, if you know the fundamentals of composition, it definitely helps. But I think a lot of it just comes from practice. You're just looking at things and saying like, this feels a bit maybe too tall, too wide. The windows are too separate apart. Like sometimes the references don't work that well for that. Oftentimes you have to do your own composition. So this also is kind of related to having the right planning before you start making something, before you take a decision. This is similar because you can choose the composition, the shapes, the proportions of the building quite early. And after you've done that, it's kind of harder to come back and change that composition, these shapes, these proportions. So firstly, you plan the building, and then once you have the building kind of planned, you have to figure out the composition first. I think that's a way I really like to go because the composition for buildings is really important because they are big, they're very big. They take a lot of visual space in your scene. So uh, that's why I'm just kind of doing placeholder holes for the windows so I can get the proportions, kind of using the usual units used for Counter-Strike. You have some standards, but a lot of it is just looking in the eye. And even then, after doing this work here, after doing further work on the building, I eventually did change a bit of the composition. It was a little bit more work as the building was more detailed, but the more of the composition you can nail on the earlier stages, the better. And composition isn't only applied to just this building isolated, but how it interacts with the remaining parts of the map. You've got to consider the other buildings around it. If you wanted to have more emphasis or less emphasis compared to the other parts of the layout, and so on. The main change I did on composition after I had went further on the detailing of this building was to lower the difference between the floors, the height difference, because after I kind of finished the structure of this building, it was quite tall. It was maybe similar to the reference, the real life reference, but compared to the main building I've already done on the other time-lapses, it kind of overshadowed it. It was way bigger than when you stayed on the roof of the other building, the playable roof. So I lowered the height of it a bit, and I think it improved on that matter. It overshadows the rest of the main building less. But at the same time, out of bounds work has to be very smart, as you gotta do it in a way that it makes your level kind of lived in, but at the same time you gotta be smart so you save yourself a lot of work. So for example, I could have done a one-story house over here, but then since you can go on top of the roof on the playable space, you would be able to see over the house, and because of that I would then have to do the scenery behind this house. So it adds the amount of work I have to do in total for the out of bounds considerably. So this is one of the reasons I'm doing this like 3 story tall, counting the floor level and then a tall roof on this building. It's tall because then it helps me block things behind it. So that's one way to be smart regarding these out of bounds things. If you do everything open, you have to do an entire city sometimes, and that's just not feasible. You gotta make a project that looks good, of course, lived in, but you also gotta consider, you gotta get things done, right? You can't be so ambitious sometimes. And at a first glance, having more detail on the outer bounds might seem good. Of course, it's more work, but it can even be bad sometimes, as it's a composition equation that you have to do. The playable space is the main part that the gameplay takes place on, so if you have so many out of bounds buildings, sometimes it can take away from the attention of the layout, the readability, so sometimes it can be even worse. And then you start to see why making maps is quite hard. It's so many variables to consider at the same time. They're quite subjective sometimes. They're not exact. So a lot of it just comes from practice and just what you feel in the moment. And that is only improved by the longer you analyze stuff, your own work, other people's work, and so on. So here, once I got the main shapes figured out, I started texturing it. And that's one of the good things about the out of bounds work, is that it doesn't need to be to the same level of detail that the main playable space is. So it oftentimes can be detailed and textured quite fast. Uh, One thing that really helped, both in productivity but also file size, is reutilizing assets. So one thing that CS2 and Source2 brings is the hotspotting feature. Hotspot is kind of a fast way to apply trim sheets, and it's a very fast way to texture stuff. And if you can make your own hotspot textures, you can save a lot of time just working on texturing things. So by I already had done one hotspot texture, which was the wooden, that red, kind of orange wood, kind of similar to this one you have on screen right now. But for the windows and things like that I've done on the main building so far, I used that trim and I simply colored it. I used filters in the actual material editor of the engine, and it uses the same source files, but it just tints them. It reduces contrast and things like that. So I basically didn't have to spend any work doing a new texture in Designer or anything like that. You save on file size, and you can go straight into texturing the building you want to do. For this building specifically, I did 3 variations of that hotspot texture I mentioned, and they worked perfectly fine without the troubles I mentioned. Now, on to another topic that I find very important is silhouettes. Silhouettes are very powerful and they can be exemplified by what I'm doing on the screen right now. I'm picking a straight up a corner beam and I'm twisting it a bit. I'm adding some wobbliness to it. So it adds some visual interest on the silhouette. The silhouette is a shape and then a background. The contrast between these two. So it often is an example when looking against the sky or maybe a further background. These beams are at the corner of the building, so they quite affect the silhouette of the building itself. So by me adding this wobbliness to it, these imperfections, when you look at the corners of the building against something, you have this visual interest there. And it might seem like a small detail, but on top of the map, over many objects, since you have many layers of objects on top of each other, it can add a lot to the level. And combined with that, I did this wood siding that is on the external part of the building. I spent some work just making it 3D because of the same thing of the silhouette. If it was a further building, I wouldn't have done it since it would not be that impactful and it is quite detailed. But this one being quite close to the map, you can see the silhouette. So it adds a lot to the map in 2 ways. From the front, since you have this wobbliness of the trunks themselves, and then from the side, since they poke outwards. So it's just a shape, a decision to have this detailed shape there at the cost of performance, to have this really interesting external facade. This combined with the corner I've mentioned and the balconies and the roof poking out, they all improve the silhouette and make the entire building very interesting visually. That's why trees and lampposts, cables can be so interesting for the map, because they make very powerful silhouettes and they add the shadows as well. And shadows themselves, you could say they are a sort of a 2D silhouette. If you have interesting shadows, you oftentimes have interesting silhouettes. And these silhouettes matters can also be applied to 3D modeling. You can apply more detail to the parts of your model that are seen against something, which are its extremities, its corners, and so on. And by now, I'm pretty sure I've already spoken about silhouettes quite a few times in multiple videos on this channel. It's because they really are quite important, and once I've actually taken a look and recognized them as an element to be taken care of, I feel like my art has improved considerably. Moving on, you can see that the level of detail we've reached on this building is already quite good. This means that the remaining work that will be featured on this video is just simpler things. It's about me filling in the gaps. It becomes easier since we've done this preparation part, I've done the blockout considering these factors like composition, how it would fit with the map, the colors, and so on. By doing those preparations, I guarantee that I will not have any surprises later on. And that's why you do blockouts. It might seem obvious now to some of you, but to me at least, I didn't used to do that. Even on this project, I think a lot of parts of it I just did my old way, which is I just go from 0 to 100. I gather my references, be it a single one, a few ones, multiple ones, and then I imagine it in my head. Oh, it's gonna be like this. Depending on each one's person's skill on this, it can vary a lot. So far, I've been doing it like that because I think I'm better at this. However, there's always some factor you will not be considering, and that they can come and they can sometimes be big, and you end up losing a lot of time because of them. So often I just imagine this building, they would be like that. I would have done this building, and because I thought, well, this imagination I had would work, I went and did all the details, all the trims, all the props. I did it like it was already the final version of the building. And when you're working like that, if you make any mistakes on the big picture, oh, this window is way too big, this floor is small, or the proportions don't look right, or it doesn't fit well with the rest of the map. Anytime any of these mistakes come, you'll lose way too much time just fixing them because, well, you're working at a fully detailed level. To tweak things when there's so many factors to consider, so many vertices and objects, it makes your life entirely harder. So on this building is one of my attempts to start doing more blockouts. I had imagined a lot of the features of the building, but I still did a blockout in parts of it. These blockouts did serve very well because using those concepts we discussed before, composition and so on, I was able to figure out the scale, the floors, and the mistakes before they happened on the more detailed stage of my art. So the blockouts are pretty good for you to figure out the big picture, and since it's, well, the big picture, it has big impacts. If it's wrong, you have to do a lot of things. If it's right, you have figured a lot of your work. So that's why the rest, the remaining part of this video, is just simpler stuff, because the bigger problems have already been solved. The rest, the remaining parts I have to do, even if they are big, they don't matter as much, because I have already figured the floor height, the proportions of the windows, the standard of how the windows look, how this building is looking, and it's easier to reproduce this on the remaining parts I have not done of this building. Like, I've done just this front and side facade, and there's the other parts of this building that you'll be seeing, like the behind the part of this building. But since I've done all those factors, I can just use the same style, the same standard. So it isn't any work at all. So I then also filled the other parts with more detail, and that's just putting props on, and that's probably one of the most fun parts, just finishing something up. You have the big thing done, you just clutter it up, put the trims to always mask the transitions. That is one thing to always consider, transitions, and so on. So regarding this current process of filling in the gaps, the micro scale, the granular details you do, I don't think I have much advice other than learn how the world works, observe the world, analyze how things just exist in life. And that's when going outside and going for walks or just looking at references and seeing why things are the way they are, just honestly, just going outside is probably the better way because you're just focused on just existing and looking around you. By just analyzing things over and over again, you start to see the world differently, and this way to see the world will always help you to come up with things that aren't often on references. Because yeah, there's this thing. For you to use references, you have to know, oh, this is the reference I want to use. And for that, you need to search it, But what if you don't know what you have to put there? Well, that's when having this life experience, this just having seen life and the world around you, you can just come up with stuff on your own head. You think, oh, usually this sort of building would have this and that, and for example, this might seem obvious, but for this building, I had planned it to be a mixed-use building. So you had this first floor that had those roofs on top, this walkway alongside the street that would just have store facades, and then the upper floors would just be residential units. But since I had those stores in front, I had to think of the access for the people that live there. So I could have put it in the front part of the building, but I thought, well, the main populated part that this building is facing is this exact front part facing the plaza. And then you have this back street that isn't as populated. Considering that, I thought, well, it makes sense to have the stores all be in front, and then since the building faces this smaller, less populated street, you could just put the car entrances, like a garage, and the main entrance to the housing sector just in this back part. Again, this example might seem obvious, but it does apply to other scenarios as well, and some of them might not seem as obvious. So by having this experience of knowing, oh, every type of building like this has this, or this scenario this would have this, you can then search the reference that you maybe wouldn't have searched, your other main references wouldn't have had. So knowing how the world works and how things are built and having this just observation of the world, it gives you so much aid and a basis for doing this smaller scale work. Another example, on this back street, I end up making a construction on this street, some maintenance, and this is something I've seen a lot. Like I'm currently in Brazil, and this is something that is always being done. The streets get uh, torn down quite fast because they aren't done in a good quality with the more appropriate materials. And I've been to Argentina as well, which is similar to Brazil in many ways, and I've also seen the same things. So this is an experience that I thought, well, it makes sense to have a street also being taken care of, like being on maintenance. So it was a way for me to block out the playable space while having something that makes sense. But in none of my references, I had a street on this exact place that was on maintenance. I had to have had this experience before of seeing a road being on construction, and then, well, I'm gonna make it here, and I think it will work just fine. Like, this is an obvious example. I've said that. I think everyone has seen some road being constructed or being worked on, and for many other things in life. But I'm pretty sure there's always something that you have not seen before, and if you go outside, you and start actually looking at things, trying to find things, you see them, because oftentimes we are outside, but we do not realize the things because we are busy with other stuff. So if you actively go thinking about finding things and seeing things, you end up seeing things that they are quite obvious, but they often go unnoticed. And this experience regarding seeing life and the scenarios that happen in it, regarding the environments and what is done with those environments, is something that is built over time. The longer you live, you have had more time to just see different scenarios. Sometimes you have a scenario that might be extremely rare, but it can happen and you can always use it later on your project. Sometimes you see something that's so cool, but you can't use it on your current project, but it always can come in handy later, and you can end up having the perfect idea. Oh, this fits perfectly here. I've had this happen, and this is funny because I started doing environment art quite early. On my first proper attempts at it, I was like 14 years old, and at that age, you haven't really experienced much of life. So you can't really think of anything to fill the gaps. You just come up with stuff that is kind of nonsensical, things that you think is how the world works, but you haven't seen it to actually know. So that's a thing I'm curious on what you guys think about. There are people that work on mapping that have context in specific industries, and those industries help them a lot in specific scenarios. Oh, if someone works in a factory like making cars or just, yeah, a factory in general, this person will know how to art a factory way better. And this is just the life experience that is required to do art sometimes. So tell me if you can think of any scenarios where, well, you have a specific knowledge or a certain field you work at, and because you had those things, it helped you art something or do something in mapping, be it a level design idea. But by now we're approaching the end of this time lapse. You'll see the end results just in a bit. I do not actually have anything to talk over on that tour, so I'll be leaving you guys. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video so far. If you have any suggestions, please leave them on the comments. And please tell me what you think about this format. I did cut quite a lot of footage, minor things, just me being stuck on something or just random stuff, minor repetitions. I think it cut down the video by like 20 minutes of things just delayed and nothing was happening. So tell me if you felt that there were any abrupt cuts that stopped your comprehension of what was going on, or if it was just fine for you to watch, if not even better. So hopefully there should be more videos coming soon. I still have one more video which I have the footage to record, so that should come sooner rather than later. And then I have to start going back to work on the map to have more footage, to then edit it and have more videos. But hopefully there should be more stuff soon. Thanks for watching and goodbye.